We had this conversation. I remember being here, and Rhett Lashley was on my short list from SMU. I really liked him. My biggest question is, with him getting his opportunity, was it more about who's now the TCU coach, who was the SMU coach at the time that Rhett was there?
Yeah.
Was it more about him or was it Rhett? And then Rhett came and showed that his scheme, the scheme, Mark, especially when you're in the early phases of building something, the scheme can really help you through it. All right. If you're running a scheme that requires really good offensive line play, and you don't have a really good offensive line, it requires, and of course, injuries happened and a lot of stuff when it comes to Miami. There is context to why the product of which that you saw happen, because we watched the same team play Texas A&M, and we go, okay, they got a little something. Figure it out on offense. You play pretty well defensively. Both teams are very talented. Let's see, let's get to next week. Next week, you get blown out by Middle Tennessee State, and you see what you really are. But man, Mark, Coach Cristobal has to get this one right, man.
These are not the guys that I'm thinking of that I proposed as my number one, just kind of off the wall, out of nowhere pick. But we've got Todd Monken at Georgia. I had to look up his name because I wasn't familiar with him, but I just figured, look at what we know that Mike Elko did a remarkable job at Duke, and he's a defensive-minded guy. So I thought, who did he have running the offense? So I looked up the Duke offensive coordinator from last year. I don't remember
What's his name.
I'd have to look him up again. I don't remember his name or his background.
Gotcha. And something else I want to touch on is everybody has these different philosophies. When you walk through the door, the young men that are there are now your young men, and do everything you can to coach them up. Okay. Other people have a philosophy of get your guys in here who can run your scheme. And the thing about it is, not saying it's a lose-lose, but once you start winning, Mark, who cares? Some people want to call Dan Mullen a weirdo and a clown. He starts coming in here and averaging 35 points a game. We won't give a damn.
No.
Okay. We won't care. He could average 31 and you won't care. He could average 28 and you won't care. Why? Because of what we watched last year. So let's be honest with ourselves.
And the thing about hiring somebody like that you have some questions about in regards to whether it's character or just quirkiness, awkwardness, whatever you want to term it, some of those things are bad, character issues, they ran amok. Others are just personality things. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just, he didn't do anything wrong necessarily. But anyway, it's one of the reasons why Jeremy Pruitt, who made some bad decisions at Tennessee, is in play and wanted by most Alabama fans to be back at defensive coordinator. Because if you've got a strong head coach, then that coordinator, he's not going to have nearly the impact on the program. He's not making the high-level decisions. He's not a CEO. He's football, all football. And Dan Mullen was highly successful at Mississippi State. Before that, of course, coached 2 national championship teams as an offensive coordinator at Florida. Then he was, highly successful at Mississippi State, considering their expectations and their limitations. Did very well. Known for developing quarterbacks, scheming offense as well as anyone. And then, of course, even his tenure at Florida, I know it didn't end well. They won 4 games the year before he got there. And then they went New Year's Six Bowl, New Year's Six Bowl, 3 consecutive years.
Yep. And he went 2-1 in that stint, right?
Yep. Yeah. 1-2 out of those 3 New Year's Six Bowls. And then he had 1 6-6 season. He gets fired. So he only had 1 down season. He gets fired because of it. There were some other things kind of off to the side that people didn't like, and the administration obviously didn't like, that again weren't things that were necessarily like wrong NCAA violations, just not a good look. kind of gave up in the bowl game, kind of sold out his team in a sense, said, hey, this isn't my team. I don't have my players for this game. He somewhat, I watched this about 12 times, somewhat incited a bit of a disturbance, riot, whatever you want to call it, scuffle at midfield against
Yeah,
Missouri, close to
yeah,
halftime. Didn't really do what a head coach should do. Wore a Darth Vader costume to a news conference, just did some things that didn't look great for the program. Didn't really take accountability for his defensive back, Marco Wilson throwing a shoe that cost them a win against LSU in the last game of those sorts of things that he could have done a better job as a head coach. However, he's not going to be placed in that position anymore. He's going to be scheming an offense and teaching players and instructing players.
absolutely. And that's the other thing is it's so weird where it's like, and I guess it's high and mighty for me to say this after being so tough on Manny Diaz while he was the head coach, but you know, I've said things in the past, and I've said things in the past. That's all right. But my thing is like, for somebody to have had the tenure where he was like 40-6 before he had that one bad 6-6 season. The other thing was that people felt like he did not dominate the state of Florida recruiting the way that he should have. Okay, he's winning on the football field. He's beating rivals. I think he was undefeated again. He beat us. Was he undefeated against Tallahassee in his tenure as the head coach at Florida also?
I believe so. Yes, he was.
He was undefeated against rivals in the state of Florida. He mainly got fired for all the quirky stuff. He couldn't beat Georgia. He made some SEC championship game appearances. And again, I'm not kissing his feet, but I'm just saying you have to look at things, to me, in a bigger context, especially when you're thinking about him getting a quote unquote demotion to come and be just our offensive coordinator, passing game coordinator, and quarterbacks coach. Is that a lot of those things, of course, would not be tolerated in a Coach Cristobal program, one. But two, he wouldn't even have the power to do most of that stuff anymore. It's cool. And he, again, was one of the higher choices for me that I really liked. I really like Dan Mullen and his viewpoint, his offensive philosophy, and the fact that, to me, he would fit the way Coach Cristobal would want things to look.